Let me tell you about the time my life fell apart, one lie at a time. On the surface, Chloe and I had what you might call a picture-perfect life. Nice little house just outside of London, good jobs, a solid group of friends, the works. I'd always been proud of what we built together, and I really believed we had it all figured out. I had a stable office job which paid the bills and then some, and Chloe, well, she was a social butterfly, always bouncing around from one thing to the next, leaving me feeling like the dull, responsible husband holding it all down. But things started to go sideways, and looking back, maybe I just didn't want to see the signs for what they were. It began subtly. You know how they say the devil's in the details? They're not kidding. At first, it was small stuff. She'd spend a lot of time on her phone, even during dinner. I'd see her thumb furiously typing away, eyes locked on that little screen like it held the secrets of the universe. And when I'd ask, "Who are you texting?" she'd just laugh it off or say something like, "Oh, just Lucy," her friend who was supposedly always in some kind of crisis. But it was the way she'd delete messages almost instantly, like she couldn't wait to get rid of them, that started gnawing at me. I'm not stupid. I've seen enough to know when something feels off. Then came the excuses. The sudden workouts and personal training sessions at weird hours. I'm talking 8 p.m. on a Friday night. Really? Chloe never gave a damn about the gym before. But now, she's working on her fitness like she's training for a marathon. And let's not forget the girls' nights out. One night she'd tell me she was out for cocktails with Lucy and some other friends, but whenever I asked about it afterward, it was always the same vague story. Oh, it was just the usual, nothing special. And Lucy? Don't even get me started. The supposed best friend, who never seems to be around whenever I try to reach her or plan a double date. Convenient, huh? It all started coming together like puzzle pieces I didn't want to fit. One night, I overheard her talking on the phone, whispering like she didn't want anyone to hear. Her voice had this tone to it, soft, intimate, almost like she was talking to a lover. When I walked into the room, she nearly dropped her phone, said something like, "I'll call you back later," and hung up, looking like a kid caught stealing from the cookie jar. "Who was that?" I asked. She rolled her eyes and said, "Just Lucy again. God, you're always so paranoid." Paranoid. Yeah, that's the word she kept throwing at me, making me feel like I was the one losing my mind. I tried to talk myself down, tried to remind myself we were just going through a rough patch, that maybe I was being overly suspicious. But those moments kept piling up, and they were hard to ignore. Our friends Simon and Alice noticed too. I could see it in their eyes when Chloe would disappear from a party or a social gathering early. She'd always come up with some excuse. "I'm tired, I've got a headache," or my personal favorite, "I've got an early start tomorrow." Simon and Alice, bless them, would shoot me these looks like they were asking, "Is everything okay?" And I would nod, plaster on a smile, and say, "Yeah, she's just tired." What else could I say? Still, there was something eating away at me, a kind of restless anxiety that wouldn't let me sleep at night. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every weird thing Chloe did over and over. The night she came back home wearing perfume she never wore before, the time she seemed almost giddy, like she had a secret she couldn't wait to keep. And when I tried to get close to her, like plan a date night, cook dinner, maybe get a bit of that spark back, she'd brush me off. One night I lit some candles, made her favorite pasta dish, and put on the album that played on our first date. All I got was an eye roll and a quick peck on the cheek. "Not tonight, James. I'm really not in the mood," she'd say, like it was a chore to even acknowledge me. Eventually, I had to tell someone, or I was going to lose my damn mind. So, I called up Tom, my best mate since high school. We met at our usual spot, a quiet pub a few blocks away, and I laid it all out for him. The messages, the late nights, the workouts. I expected him to freak out, tell me that I was right to be worried, that she was clearly cheating. But instead, he just nodded and said, "Mate, maybe she's just going through something. You know how relationships can be. A rough patch doesn't mean the end." I could see he was trying to help, trying to play peacemaker, but it didn't stop the growing pit in my stomach. After that night, I knew I had to get to the bottom of whatever the hell was going on. I mean, yeah, maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe she really was just working on herself, hanging out with friends. But the idea that Chloe was hiding something from me, it wouldn't let go. So, I decided to start paying closer attention, to put the pieces together. Every time she'd go out, I'd check the time. Every time she came back late, I'd try to smell her clothes, looking for traces of perfume or booze or whatever else might be there. Every time she'd leave her phone unattended for just a second, I'd stare at it, my fingers itching to unlock it and find out what she was hiding. And so began my descent into suspicion, doubt, and eventually betrayal. This was just the start of it, and believe me, things only got darker from here. I couldn't keep living in this limbo of suspicion and denial. I had to know what was going on, and Chloe sure as hell wasn't going to tell me herself. I was constantly on edge, every small action of hers an accusation hanging in the air. But I had no proof. Nothing I could confront her with that wouldn't just bounce off her ironclad excuses. I knew I had to get clever, think outside the box. One evening, as she was getting ready for one of her gym sessions, I caught a break. She left her laptop open on the kitchen table while she hopped in the shower. It was now or never. My hands were trembling as I sat down and opened the lid, but my curiosity far outweighed my guilt. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for answers. That's what I told myself. Anyway, I started scanning through her email, then her messages, but there was nothing obvious. Until I opened her calendar. There were all these weird entries, cryptic abbreviations, little symbols that didn't make any sense, like TNCBD, and sometimes just a single heart or star emoji. They weren't marked as work meetings or any normal plans. I'd click on the entry, and all it would say is busy. Busy doing what? But these entries lined up with the nights she'd disappear. There was a whole code like something out of a spy movie. It wasn't like Chloe to use her laptop for much outside of work, so I knew this was where she was hiding her secrets. I started Googling some of the terms, but nothing came up that made sense. No results, just dead ends. And that's when I knew these weren't normal plans. They were codes for something far more twisted, something she didn't want me or anyone else to understand. But how was I supposed to crack it? I spent the next few nights playing detective, trying to piece together her movements, her appointments, the patterns in her behavior. But all that got me was more confusion and more anger. It was driving me mad, like trying to do a puzzle when half the pieces were missing. So when she told me one Friday night that she'd be going out with the girls for a drink, I decided I'd had enough of the guessing games. I was going to follow her plain and simple. I knew it was desperate, but desperate was all I had left. That night, she got all dolled up, hair perfectly curled, makeup on point, a black dress that clung to her figure like a second skin. I watched her preen in the mirror, watched her adjust the dress to make sure just the right amount of skin showed. "You sure you're just meeting Lucy?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked with the strain. She smirked at me in the mirror. "Of course, who else would I be meeting?" She grabbed her purse, blew me a quick kiss, and was out the door before I could respond. I waited a good 15 minutes before grabbing my car keys. I didn't know where I was going exactly, but I had a hunch. I kept a safe distance behind her, following her little black hatchback through the narrow London streets until we reached an area I didn't know, some fancy neighborhood filled with mansions. Not the kind of place you'd go for drinks with the girls. She pulled up in front of this massive house, more like a bloody palace. There were cars lined up outside, and people were streaming in, all dressed to the nines, like they were going to some exclusive party or club. I parked a bit further away, close enough to see, but far enough not to be noticed. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Chloe stepped out of her car and joined the crowd heading towards the house. And she wasn't just going to a bar. This was something else entirely. The men were in sleek suits, and the women, well, let's just say they weren't leaving much to the imagination. Chloe fit right in, walking confidently like she belonged, like she'd been here 100 times before. My heart was pounding as I sat in the car, frozen. What the hell was going on? My wife was waltzing into some exclusive mansion party dress like I couldn't even find the words. But I had to know more. So I got out of the car, my nerves a twisted mess, and made my way to the house. I couldn't just walk in. Hell, I wasn't even dressed for it. But luck was on my side, and I noticed a delivery truck pulling up to the driveway. Thinking fast, I picked up an empty cardboard box from the back of the truck and headed to the front door, trying to act like I belonged. Delivery for inside, I mumbled to the bouncer standing guard. He barely looked at me, just grunted and waved me in. It was that easy. Once I got past the door, it felt like I'd stepped into another world. The air was thick with perfume and cologne, the lights were dim, and the music was loud and pulsing. People were dancing, drinking, and flirting. But it wasn't just flirting, it was something much more charged, more intimate. And there, in the middle of it all, was Chloe. She looked like a completely different person, seductive, wild, confident in a way I'd never seen her. She had a drink in one hand and was talking to a tall, good-looking guy in a suit, laughing at something he said. And she wasn't shy about it, touching his arm, leaning in close, whispering in his ear. My stomach twisted into knots, and my head felt like it was going to explode. I knew I needed proof. So I pulled out my phone and started recording quick, shaky shots of Chloe and this guy. Chloe dancing with strangers, Chloe sipping on champagne and flashing a smile that didn't belong to me. I felt like a voyeur, a peeping Tom, but I had to have something to confront her with. Something that she couldn't deny, couldn't laugh off as paranoia. And the further I moved through the house, the weirder things got. There were private booths draped in heavy velvet curtains, and people would go inside and come out looking disheveled, if you catch my drift. Chloe stayed near the main floor, but it didn't make it any less damning. It was all right there in front of my eyes. The proof that my marriage was a lie, that my wife had been living a double life. I stayed as long as I could bear, and then I got the hell out of there. I didn't know what to think, what to do. It was all too much. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that Chloe was willing to throw away everything we'd built for. What? Cheap thrills? A few drinks and some dirty dancing with strangers? I got home that night and just sat on the couch, staring at the floor, replaying the footage over and over. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, like everything I knew was crumbling. How was I supposed to confront her? What could I even say? All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. And whatever happened next, it wasn't going to be pretty. The next day felt like a waking nightmare. I hardly slept that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Chloe, flirting, dancing, dressed like someone I didn't know. When I finally did manage to get some shut-eye, it was a fitful, angry kind of sleep, the kind where you wake up more exhausted than when you went to bed. And I'd wake up hoping it was all a bad dream. But reality would slam back into me like a freight train. I spent the entire morning hunched over my phone, replaying the footage I'd taken the night before. I analyzed every detail. The way she laughed, the way she touched that guy's arm, the carefree look on her face. It made me sick to my stomach, but I couldn't stop watching like a masochist picking at a wound. There was no denying it. This wasn't just harmless fun, as she liked to call it. There was something deeper, something raw and real about the way she acted with those people, like she was living out some fantasy I never even knew she had. By the time Chloe came home that afternoon, I was on edge, running on coffee and adrenaline. She walked in like she owned the place, acting as if nothing was wrong, as if the night before was just another typical evening out. She dropped her purse on the floor, kicked off her shoes, and shot me that casual smile that used to make my heart flutter. Now it just made my blood boil. "Hey, babe," she said, heading straight for the kitchen. "You wanted to make us some lunch?" I couldn't help but stare at her, trying to read her face, searching for any sign of guilt or remorse. But she was good. Too good. I couldn't tell if she was pretending or if she genuinely didn't give a damn. I followed her into the kitchen, trying to keep my voice steady. "So, how was last night? You have fun with Lucy and the girls?" Her back stiffened for just a second. A split second I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't staring so hard. She turned to face me, that same smile plastered across her face. "Yeah, it was fun. We just had a few drinks, caught up, nothing too wild." I felt my fists clench involuntarily. She was going to lie straight to my face after everything. Really? Just a few drinks, huh? She cocked her head, looking at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Yeah, what's with the third degree, James? Just seems interesting, that's all," I said, trying to keep the bile down. "Especially considering where you really went last night." Her eyes narrowed, and she quickly looked down at her phone, her fingers scrolling through messages as if to avoid making eye contact. "What are you talking about?" I couldn't hold it in anymore. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and hit play on the video. The audio wasn't great, but it didn't need to be. There she was, front and center, laughing, flirting, dancing with strangers in that goddamn mansion. Her face went white as soon as she saw it. and she dropped her phone onto the countertop with a clatter. James, what is this? She stammered, trying to sound shocked, but I could see the panic behind her eyes. She was like a cornered animal, looking for a way out. You tell me, I said, my voice low, trying to keep the rage in check. You said you were with Lucy, but you ended up at some party, dressed like that, doing whatever it is you were doing. So, what the hell is going on? She grabbed the phone from my hands, trying to stop the video, but I yanked it back. James, please, it's not what it looks like, I swear. It was just an experiment, okay? Harmless flirting, that's all. I was just having a bit of fun, trying something new. It doesn't mean anything. Harmless flirting? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, 'cause it sure looked harmless to me. Hanging out in some mansion with strangers. Touching that guy like you couldn't wait to rip his clothes off. Harmless, right? She took a step back, tears welling in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it. She always did this, turn on the waterworks to make herself the victim, to make me feel like the bad guy. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. Okay, it was a mistake. A mistake? I shouted, unable to hold back anymore. This wasn't a one-time thing, Chloe. You planned this. You've been going to these parties for God knows how long, and you lied to my face about it. What the hell happened to us? Why would you do this? Chloe wiped her tears away, her expression hardening. Maybe because our marriage is boring, James. Maybe because you're boring. I needed something exciting, something that made me feel alive. You think I wanted things to get like this? You think I enjoy sneaking around? So, this is my fault? You're blaming me for your sneaky little sex parties? She threw her hands up in frustration. I didn't want to hurt you, but I needed something more. Everything with us, it's so routine. We wake up, we go to work, we come home, we watch TV. It's like living the same day over and over again. I didn't ask for this life, James, it just happened. Right, so your idea of excitement is getting half naked with strangers and lying to your husband about it? It was Lucy's idea, she shot back defensively. She took me to one of those parties just to see what it was like. She said it would help me loosen up, help me relax. I didn't know it would go this far. Don't you dare put this on Lucy, I said, my voice trembling with rage. You made the choice to lie. You made the choice to cheat. And now you're trying to act like this is all some accident. God, James, can't you see? This was never about hurting you. I felt trapped. Like I was drowning in this life we built, and I didn't know how to save myself. We stood there in the kitchen, just staring at each other, the silence like a ticking time bomb between us. I didn't know what to say, how to make sense of anything. Everything felt so surreal, like I was watching my own life fall apart from a distance. All the years we'd spent together, the love, the trust, it all seemed like some sick joke. Do you even love me? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, looking away. I do, but I don't know if it's the same kind of love anymore. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. All those years, all the memories, and for what? So she could chase some twisted idea of excitement at my expense? After Chloe stormed out of the kitchen, I just stood there, feeling like my world had caved in. I picked up my phone and called my sister, Anna. She'd always been my rock, the one person who knew how to make sense of everything. When I told her what happened, she didn't gasp or curse or judge. She just listened, let me spill my guts out, every raw, painful detail. James, she said softly after I'd finished, you're going through hell right now, and I can't pretend to know how you feel. But you need to take a step back, breathe, and figure out what you want. Don't let Chloe's bullshit make you forget who you are. You deserve better than this. She was right. I needed to think, to get my head straight before I made any rash decisions. But how the hell was I supposed to figure out what I wanted when my whole life felt like it had been turned upside down? By the time I got over the initial shock and heartbreak, something darker started creeping in anger. A rage so thick and overwhelming that I couldn't think straight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe with those people at the party, saw the way she laughed and danced like I didn't even exist. It wasn't enough that she cheated on me, that she broke my trust. No, she had to play the victim, make it all my fault. And you know what? I couldn't let that slide. Not anymore. It was a few nights later when the idea came to me. I was sitting alone in my living room, nursing a bottle of whiskey and staring at my phone, replaying that cursed footage for the 100th time. Each time I watched it, my blood boiled hotter, and I felt more and more powerless. That's when it hit me. Maybe I couldn't stop what she did, but I sure as hell could make her pay for it. She wasn't going to get away with turning my life upside down. So I called up Simon. Simon was the guy you called when you needed something done, the guy who always knew a way around things, especially online. If anyone could help me make Chloe regret every one of her choices, it was him. I told him we needed to meet, that it was urgent, and he agreed to swing by my place that night. When he arrived, he took one look at me, unkempt, angry, and holding back tears, and knew something serious was up. "What the hell's going on, mate?" he asked, sitting down on my couch and giving me that look like he was bracing himself for some bad news. And then I told him everything. All of it. From Chloe's lies to the party, to the footage I had on my phone. I laid it out bare, like a man confessing his sins, but all I could feel was the anger burning hotter with every word. Simon sat there quietly for a moment, taking it all in. "James, mate, that's messed up, but what are you planning to do with all this?" I clenched my jaw, trying to keep the words from spilling out too forcefully. "I want to expose her. I want everyone to see what she's been doing. Make sure she can't hide behind her lies anymore." He shook his head, clearly conflicted. "I get it, I do. She deserves to pay for what she did to you, no question. But putting that video out there? That's serious, man. Once you put it on the internet, you can't take it back. It could destroy her." "That's the point," I said, almost snarling. "She destroyed our marriage, our lives. I don't want her to walk away clean from this. I want her to feel what I felt. She deserves to be humiliated." Simon leaned back, running his hand through his hair, clearly torn. "James, this is revenge, plain and simple. You're hurting, and I get it. But think about what you're doing. This could get really messy. For you too." I knew he was right, at least on some level. But that part of me, the part that was hurt and betrayed, couldn't be reasoned with. I'd spent too much time being the nice guy, the understanding husband. Not anymore. "I've already made up my mind, Simon. You said you'd help me if I needed you. Well, I need you now. Are you in or not?" Simon let out a long sigh and nodded, though I could see the reluctance in his eyes. "Allricht, man, I'm in. But just remember, you asked for this." Over the next few days, Simon and I got to work. We sat at my kitchen table for hours, going through every second of footage I'd recorded, picking out the most damning clips of Chloe, her dancing with those guys, the way she'd lean in and whisper to them, the looks they'd give her. We edited it together, cutting the video into short, sharp moments, moments that left nothing to the imagination. And then we added captions that painted the whole sordid story, that showed the world exactly what kind of person Chloe was when she thought no one was looking. It was brutal, and even as I watched the finished product, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and shame. It was like looking at a train wreck, devastating and impossible to turn away from. But it was done, and there was no going back. Simon set up a bunch of anonymous social media accounts, made sure it couldn't be traced back to either of us, and then we hit upload. The video went live on a handful of platforms: Reddit, Facebook, even a couple of those closed forums where gossip and scandal spread like wildfire. And then we waited. It didn't take long. Within hours, the video was being shared, commented on, dissected. People I didn't even know were leaving comments, some in shock, others with their own stories of betrayal. And the views, God, the views, they started piling up by the thousands, then tens of thousands, and before I knew it, hundreds of thousands. Chloe's face, her actions, all of it was out there for the world to see, and the internet did what it does best: judge, mock, and spread it like wildfire. I felt vindicated in a way, seeing people tear her down, call her out for what she did. For a moment, I felt like I'd finally gotten some justice. But with that vindication came something else: doubt. Like, had I gone too far? I pushed those thoughts down, drowned them out with whiskey and adrenaline. This wasn't about being the good guy anymore. This was about revenge. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit Chloe. Her phone was ringing off the hook: calls, texts, voicemails from friends, family, even complete strangers. I watched as she sat on the couch, face buried in her hands, sobbing as the notifications lit up her screen. She tried to delete the video, tried to report it, but it was too late. The internet had its teeth sunk in, and it wasn't letting go. And it didn't stop there. Her job found out about the video. She worked in a pretty conservative office, and let's just say they weren't thrilled to have one of their employees at the center of a public scandal. She lost it one night, yelling at me, her voice cracking with desperation. "What did you do, James? Why would you do this to me?" But I didn't answer. What could I say? I just watched her crumble, like a tower of lies finally coming undone. The whole thing started spilling over into my own life, too. One of my coworkers, Richard, pulled me aside one day at the office, giving me this look like he knew everything. "James, listen," he said quietly. "I heard about what's going on. I'm sorry you're going through this, mate. But you got to be careful. Doing stuff like this, putting it out there, it's not just about her anymore. It could backfire. Legally, professionally, personally." I tried to brush him off, try to act like I was fine. But deep down, his words gnawed at me. Was I becoming the villain in my own story? I didn't know anymore. I just wanted Chloe to feel what I felt, to be stripped of her facade, to know that her actions had consequences. But what if Richard was right? What if I'd gone too far? Days turned into weeks, and the chaos only grew. Chloe became a shell of herself, haunted, desperate, trying to claw back any semblance of control over her life. And me? I watched it all unfold, caught between a sick satisfaction and the creeping dread that maybe, just maybe, this revenge had cost me more than I ever anticipated. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach its inevitable conclusion: divorce. Chloe was furious, and to be honest, she had every reason to be. The video exposed more than just her infidelity. It laid bare everything she'd been trying to hide, and it ruined her. But I won't pretend it was all black and white. In a way, we ruined each other. And when she finally served me with divorce papers, accusing me of emotional abuse and ruining her reputation, I knew we were beyond saving. We were going to war. The arguments that followed were some of the ugliest moments of my life. All that anger, all that resentment that had been festering for years came spilling out like poison. There were no boundaries anymore, no rules of civility. We fought over everything. Our home, the money in our accounts, even Max, our Labrador who'd been with us since our second anniversary. Chloe fought dirty, and I was right there with her. I didn't care. If she wanted a battle, she was going to get one. Chloe's family got involved too. Her brother, Michael, confronted me one night when I was coming out of a bar. He grabbed me by the collar, shoved me up against a brick wall, his face twisted in rage. "You think this is a game, you bastard?" he spat. "You think you can just destroy her life and walk away? If you ever cared about her, about us, you'll take down that video. You'll end this." I shook him off, but inside, the guilt hit me like a sucker punch. She did this to herself, Mike. All of it. I'm just showing the world the truth. But even as the words left my mouth, I could hear how hollow they sounded. Truth and revenge had become so tangled in my head, I wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. In the midst of all this chaos, I met Laura, my divorce lawyer. The first time I sat down in her office, I was a wreck, unshaven, disheveled, a man whose life was unraveling. I remember fumbling with my words as I explained everything, from the cheating to the video to the brutal divorce that was looming. Laura was calm, professional, but there was something in her eyes, a compassion I hadn't felt from anyone in a long time. "Look, James," she said after listening to my whole story, "you're in a tough spot. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is going to be messy, but I'm here to make sure you come out of this as whole as possible." She was right about the messiness. The divorce process was brutal. Every meeting with Chloe and her lawyer felt like stepping into a battlefield. We'd sit across from each other in these stuffy conference rooms, hurling accusations back and forth like grenades. Chloe blamed me for destroying her life, claimed that my actions had cost her her job, her friends, her dignity. And sure, I'd say all the things you're supposed to say in those situations. That she brought this on herself, that she was the one who cheated, lied, and betrayed me. But the thing is, I wasn't exactly the hero of this story. I knew what I'd done, and I knew that whatever victories I claimed in this divorce would come at a cost. And there were things that came out in court that only deepened the pain. Chloe's double life was even more elaborate than I thought. It wasn't just a one-off party or a desperate search for excitement. She'd been seeing other men for years, sometimes in secret clubs, sometimes right under my nose when I thought she was out for yoga or brunch with Lucy. It was like discovering a whole different person behind the woman I'd married, a stranger who wore my wife's face. The court proceedings dragged on for months, draining us both emotionally and financially. And yet, in a twisted way, I started to feel more like myself again. Each step I took toward breaking away from Chloe felt like a step toward freedom. And through it all, Laura was by my side, fierce, determined, and always willing to listen. We spent hours together, poring over legal documents, preparing strategies, and sometimes just talking. She'd tell me about her own divorce, about how she managed to rebuild her life afterward. There was this warmth to her, a kindness that made those dark days a little more bearable. When the divorce was finally finalized, I didn't feel the triumph I thought I would. It was more like relief, like an unbearable weight had finally been lifted off my shoulders. Chloe and I had torn each other to shreds, but at least now it was over. The house was sold, the assets divided, and I got to keep Max. In the end, he was the only thing we both truly loved. I was free, but the aftermath left me hollow. I spent weeks wandering around my new, smaller flat, unsure of what to do with myself. I'd lost my wife, my old life, and in many ways, my identity. For a while, I tried numbing the pain with booze and one-night stands, cheap distractions that left me feeling emptier than before. But Max was always there, his head resting on my lap, as if to remind me that I still had something worth holding on to. Bit by bit, I started to rebuild. I joined a gym, partly out of anger, partly out of a need to feel like I was in control of something. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had always been there, but who I'd let drift away during the course of my marriage. And I started meeting with Laura outside of her office. Dinners, walks in the park, the kind of things I'd forgotten how to enjoy. She was my lawyer, yes, but more than that, she became my friend. And soon, she became more than that too. Our relationship didn't happen overnight. It grew slowly, like a flame that starts with a spark and then builds into something warm, comforting. Laura was everything Chloe wasn't, steady, honest, and willing to see me for who I was, flaws and all. She didn't ask me to be perfect, didn't expect me to have all the answers. She just listened, and that was all I needed. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was rediscovering myself, finding pieces of who I used to be before Chloe and I got lost in our mess. I took up new hobbies, things I'd always wanted to do, but never made time for. Cooking, hiking, even dabbling in photography. And with every new thing I tried, every step I took, the anger and bitterness slowly began to fade. One night, after a few drinks and a long conversation with Laura about life and loss, I sat down at my computer and opened up Reddit. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, or even why I wanted to say it, but I just typed. I poured out my story, the highs, the lows, the mistakes, and the lessons learned. I didn't hold back. I wanted people to know what it felt like to have your world ripped apart, but also to know that it was possible to come out the other side, to find hope again, to rebuild. So here I am, sharing this with you, as raw and honest as I can be. My life isn't perfect. There are days when the past still haunts me, when I still feel the sting of betrayal. But I'm learning, every day, to let go a little more, to forgive myself for the things I did out of anger and hurt, to let go of the person I thought Chloe was, and to embrace the person I've become. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life doesn't always go the way you plan. But sometimes, the chaos leads you to places you never thought you'd go. And maybe, just maybe, those places are exactly where you're meant to be.